Where's this going to be shown?
What is that?
This isn't going to be shown. Are you kidding me? They're throwing this in the garbage.
You can't do 16-hour days in that scenario and not have a few laughs at some point. I think it was a necessity.
First of all, there's no film in there. Let's start off with something basic.
We got film in that camera?
This never happened. You never had people, healthy people, men, women, and children put in gas chambers and killed them.
If anything weird happened in my groups, homicides, stabbings, impalements, train crashes.
How do you live with that? How do you offset a little bit of that? Because it never goes away, but you can't focus on it 100%. So you laugh about it.
I've not lost my mind, and I'm not being disrespectful. My intent for this very unique episode of You Just Have to Laugh is with great respect and sincere admiration, because using humor and laughter in the same sentence with the terror attacks of 9/11 and the Holocaust are not my words. They are the words of real people and true stories of people who lived through these horrific events. You are about to learn how humor and laughter were not only one of their greatest survival skills, they were a gift.
On June 11, 1942, the SS came to this town and knocked on the doors 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and they gathered about 900 people into the town square. And that was the last time I saw my mother and my brother.
Well, the seriousness of the job is so high that we're constantly looking to alleviate that, and we do it through humor and practical jokes. And
We used to have a guy, George Gabriel. He'd cut the fireman's hair. He'd cut the other guy's hair. And he would do it on the apparatus floor because it was just easy to sweep up. So he's cutting one of the guy's hair on a sunny summer day. The door's open, and somebody sneaks out and puts a big sign up. Free haircuts. And all of a sudden the line starts forming outside the door. All these people from the neighborhood. I'm next.
At 15 years old, Jack was put on a truck and taken to Unilagen, a camp for Jews. It was a forced labor camp, not a concentration camp. Later, the forced labor camps were turned into concentration camps. Jack explains the difference.
Concentration camp means that you could barely come out alive. It was starvation, disease, hard labor, and most people who were, I would say, 45, 50 years old lasted 3 months, 4 months, sometimes 6 months.
John Keenan was my boss in Squad 41. He said the kitchen table is the most important piece of equipment in the firehouse, because that's where you came in, you saw what's going on with the guys, you drilled there, you talked about fires and stuff.
The kitchen table, whether it be the morning or at a meal, everybody's together at once, and that's when you have to be really on top of your game, because if there's any perceived weakness, it's going to be exposed in the kitchen, and then we'll have a few laughs.
Kitchen tables, it's kind of like you never need to go to a counselor if you just speak what's on your mind there. But we always notice everything about it, and a big thing is hair in our job. Like, we had this one guy that was a good-looking guy. He looked like Chachi from Happy Days, And all of a sudden, he started losing his hair, and he was always in the bathroom checking himself out, So we copped onto that. So what we would do is when he would go up to the bunk and be asleep, we would rip out our own hair and put it on his pillow.
There was a television show in the United States called Hogan's Heroes, and it showed how everybody in the prison camp made jokes and laughed at the officials in the camp. Complete television fantasy.
None of that was tolerated. If somebody would make a joke about Hitler or Goebbels, the next day the Gestapo would come and they would arrest him, and they would tell him, "We'll show you how to make fun," and he would be in a concentration camp 5, 6 months, and he wouldn't come out alive. Wow. They showed him fun. We'll show you our fun.
When they break your balls in the firehouse, that means you're in. If they're not breaking your balls,
You're out.
then you're probably not respected. There's a reason why you're not involved in the humor. You're kind of double-edged sword.
Right.
If you're the brunt of jokes then you're part
Status
of the family.
quo,
You know,
you
like
know?
they're offering you an opportunity to relieve the tension with some humor. And
There was a movie titled Life is Beautiful that won 3 Academy Awards. It was about an Italian waiter that got sent to a concentration camp.
The Beautiful Life was a fable, but it had no connection to reality. I have yet to see a film about a concentration camp that was real. I think it's impossible to make it.
Why is that?
Because the people who make it were not there. Even if somebody is there, nobody would read this stuff. It is so horrific.
we go to, it's a project building, we get to the door. Now, we have a truck, an engine, and an EMS crew is all at the door. I knock on the door, and we can hear the guy inside saying, I'm okay, but you're going to have to come in, I can't get to the door.
Whether somebody was more clever to survive or had more abilities to survive.
With humor, yeah. Is it possible?
No. No. It was the luck of the draw.
So I pull the cylinder, we go in, and the chair is tipped so that the bottom of the chair is facing us as we're walking into the apartment. And through this plastic chair, the man's testicles had been squeezed through the little space in the slats of the seat of the chair. And they had swelled to the point where
Bocce balls.
it was painful just to look at. Just to see it was painful. We had to take a second to figure it out. Everybody kind of backed up.
Young people had a better chance because they were more aggressive in camp. They took more chances because they didn't have the burden of worrying what happened to my wife, what happened to my child.
I kneel down, and I'd never dealt with a man's testicles through the base of a chair before. And I think the best way to do it.
One day, they asked us to wash the floor of the food warehouse. It was the Nazi warehouse, not our warehouse. So he and I, we go there, and the floor is made of a slate, black slate.
So the first thing we had to do was get hold of the testicles and hold them to one side and cut the slat on the opposite side, hold that back. And in doing it, I had to have one guy that I said, I need some gloves down here. And there was somebody in gloves, and the gloves just got thrown down in front of me. And so the junior man,
No meaning to junior man.
everybody kind of pushes the newest guy in the firehouse forward, and he was designated to hold the man's testicles.
The more we washed the floor, the dirtier the water got, even though the floor was clean, because some of that slate would rub off. So we tell the guard that we have to change the water. And while he's not looking, we put in cakes of margarine under the rag in the bucket. And we go out to empty the water. And we do it over and over again.
You have no idea.
You have no idea.
So I cut one slat, hold that back. Now he has to sort of speed bag the testicles to the other side of the chair. While one slat's being held, the other slat's being cut. We get both slats back and pull the chair off the man and transport him. Like when we got to the street, as soon as the doors closed. We stayed professional for the sake of the man's dignity, completely naked in the chair. No explanation as to how it happened, but as soon as the doors closed, we were, it was hysterical. We couldn't stop laughing.
Humor was a survival skill because you had nothing else to sustain you.
Could you guys do your job without humor and laughter? I mean, let's exclude 9/11 because that's a one at a time. Could you guys do your job and do it as effectively?
As effectively, I'll say no. You could do your job, but not as effectively because the humor gave you a little bit of, relaxed you a little bit. It gave you a larger perspective of things.
Even before I went to the camps, in the town where I was with my mother and my brother, there was a double hanging, and I knew one of the person was being hung. And what the Nazis did, they made the civilian population come and look at the execution. Well, I was 14 years old when that happened.
9/11. Was it okay to laugh? Is humor?
I would say the immediate few days after 9/11, there really was no laughter, primarily because of the shock of it all, the severity of it. And I during that period of time, Mike, I think you'll agree that there was no humor at that time.
I'd say use the term. We were on Queer Street. You know, we were shell shocked, and I mentioned it before, and I think it's worth mentioning again. Is the ironworkers from Local 40 came in and they pitched in, and you know, they bailed us out big time. What a great group of guys they were. You know, and yeah. But as far as us, there was not much jocularity, and it was the first time. I had been on almost 20 years at the time, and it was the first time I ever saw the department in that state where there really was no laughter at that point. You know.
Ground Zero is the only time I ever looked forward to being someplace else other than the firehouse, to work there. You know, it was a place of honor to be there. You know, that was my Pearl Harbor, my generation's Pearl Harbor. And you just had to do what you could do to get it right. And not only for the members, but for all civilians, to get as many people out there as we possibly could with honor. And that was huge.
We found a guy down in the Trade Center, I guess it was the second or third day after 9/11, and he was a worker from the Trade Center. He had his name tag on there, and he was in bad shape. He had lost both of his legs, and his torso was intact, and his face was discernible. And noticed that it had a toupee on, you know, and the toupee was in perfect shape and everything like that. And I thought to myself, wow, what a great commercial this would be for toupee glue. I mean, I wrote it down 90 stories. I lost my legs, but look at my hair. It looks great.
And this is beautiful about our makeup, that we're able to push back.
Suitable for frame.
I felt bad about that, and I had to speak to somebody about it afterwards. But and he told me that was just a way of dealing with you know, tragedy.
Unfortunately, the Holocaust was such a horrific event that you can't push it back, but you have to use something to lessen the pain, and that's humor.
Why, I'm curious, if you don't mind sharing, why did you think it was wrong to laugh about that?
Well, I mean, the fella had died, you know, it was a catastrophic situation, and I found, to myself, I didn't share with anybody, I found humor in a bad situation, so I thought maybe, you know, that wasn't really a worthy way to think, you know.
Most concentration camps had their own crematoria, but in this particular concentration camp, they didn't have their own, so they stacked up the bodies in a special room, and then when we had a load, we would load these on a truck and take them into town when there was a civilian crematorium. And so obviously we had to, Moniak and I were on a truck full of bodies, throwing the bodies off to be burned. And so we were making jokes about who's going to throw us off and how these people looked, and some of them, you know, were almost like a caricature because they only were skin and bone. And so to us, you know, as young children, it was strange to look at each body and say, look at this guy. He looks crazy. You know, look at this guy. He probably hasn't eaten anything in a month.
When Jack first told me that story, how him and Moniak were joking around on a stack of bodies on that truck, I was amazed and inspired how humor could really help somebody in that horrific moment. But I had to ask Jack, because I thought, like many of you may be thinking, why it was okay to laugh when you're standing on top of dead bodies.
Well, I think it was, the conversation was, we certainly couldn't talk about what we're going to get for dinner. We couldn't talk about what normal people talk about. And we were youngsters, so this to us, and we were so used to see dead bodies that we were no longer affected like a normal person who would see dead bodies would be deeply affected, but to us it was almost everyday stuff.
We resided on the 78th floor of Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. We're 1,000 feet in the air. Cell phones didn't even work well up there. And people would come to our office on the 4th of July to look down on the fireworks displays in New York City. We were in our office on 9/11/2001, expecting 50 people that day. The only other person in the office from my company was David Frank when the plane hit the building. It pushed it. The whole building was tilting over. David and I actually said goodbye to each other because we thought the building had moved so far we were going to fall to the street. And then the building stopped and it started moving back to its vertical position. When it got to be straight up and down, I went back into my office and I met Roselle, my guide dog, coming out from under my desk. David said there were millions of pieces of burning paper falling outside the window. He saw the fire and smoke above us. And I got David to get our guests together and get them to one of the stairwells, and we started down.
A lieutenant that had been there the whole time, since the beginning, had not been off the piles and was popping up and down, tunneling or searching. Then he'd come back to the surface, and the chief said he really should have been off the piles hours ago. Go tell him that he's relieved.
He hadn't slept in about 3 days.
We got about 10 floors down when suddenly we heard from above us somebody shouting, "There's a burn victim coming through, move to the side of the stairs," and we did.
There's a group of us now that are trying to get this guy off the pile, Mike being one of them. He's now grabbing hold of Mike, taking his shirt off him, and wouldn't leave the pile.
There were times that it got very quiet on the stairs. And the first time that it did, I went, oh, this isn't good, because people were starting to just kind of dwell on things. And so I decided I had to speak up, and I said, now I don't want anyone to worry. Roselle and I are here. Roselle is my guide dog. I'm blind, and we're here. And, you know, we're offering a half-price special to get you out today only if the lights go out.
We finally had to sneak a backboard behind him.
About 6 of us tied him to the board, and then we started to carry him down.
He was not leaving without being dragged off. So this is how he leaves, and we have to kind of pass him down. There's only like these small corridors where we were passing buckets, and so he goes down through the small corridor. Well, he gets to the street, arrives at the street, and someone assumes that we found him, like we dug him out, and the whole place erupts in an ovation.
Like 2,000 guys.
Everybody on the street, all of the reporters that were there, the ambulance people, anybody who was standing there now assumes that after 2 days we found someone alive. And I remember thinking it was funny then, and at that point there was no laughter happening. You know, like we just didn't have the opportunity to laugh at it. It just wasn't the right time. Since then, we've been able to look back at that. I know I've retold that story many times, but
it seemed like it was just a great relief for everybody. Everybody was looking for some good news, because we really hadn't found anybody in a couple of days. There were really no survivors, and people just dropped their tools and raised their hands and clapped, and everybody was very together on that, you know, just looking for something good.
When things get tense, when people feel under pressure, the best thing that any of us can ever do is try to find a way to relieve the pressure.
During this time, you know, if you could do a little therapy on yourself with what you thought may possibly be a little funny, you know, you just kept it inside. You didn't blurt it out as you normally would do.
No, I didn't discuss that toupee story for months till months after that. I kept that to myself.
Did you?
And it bothered me to the point where I actually had to talk to somebody about it, you know.
Yeah.
Humor is like a salve when you are wounded. It makes you cope.
If you're focusing so much on the pressure that you can't do anything, you're paralyzed by fear, you're paralyzed by forces you think you have no control over, the only way you're going to regain control is to be able to step back from it.
looking back, it was probably the only moment I could remember. I've tried to think about the levity that happened in that. There just wasn't any of it. That was the one moment for me where I swallowed it. You know, you remembered it, and it's something I took away from it. It was just a second where, you know, the tragedy that was going on was kind of stripped off, and then you were right back into it.
We were always hoping that our family would survive and that we would be reunited after the war and life would be normal again. That was our hope. It wasn't to be.
It was tough, but I mean, the only time in my aspect of it, the only time there was any kind of humor was a close-knit group of guys like at the wake, where you talk about, I can't remember when Bobby did this, or he said that, or, you know, he was so sure that he passed the lieutenant's test, and because he told us how many answers he had, he automatically flunked, by 90 points or something, you know, and just everything at the wake would come up, you know, and some stuff with the family, but stuff that went around the kitchen table, it brought it back. It was just like they're standing next to you.
I was 15, and I survived the war until May 7th, 1945. So I was there for 3 years. My family was totally destroyed. My father died in a concentration camp. My mother, sister, and brother died in the gas chambers. So after the war, when we realized what happened, then we had to live with that memory, and then we had to use humor to overcome this memory, which we never did. So even today, to me, humor helps me to survive.
A woman came up to me after I showed her Jack's segment, and she said, you know, I just don't think his stories are very funny. And I said, ma'am, with all due respects, it doesn't matter if you think Jack's stories are funny. Jack thinks they're funny, and that's what matters.
Oh yeah, you gotta laugh, man. If you didn't, you cry.
If we hadn't, we really would have wound up in a loony bin.
It's all about making a choice.
Well, the motto's always been like, to live is to laugh.
I know guys who make a lot more money than me, and they are miserable. I go, all right, I'm going to work in 2 days, and I'm looking forward to it.
If you give me $1,000 today, or give me a good joke, I'll take the joke.
I'll give you a good joke. Will you give me $1,000?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.